All right, good morning again. Can you hear me now? So today I'll be speaking to skillful speech. And skillful speech is the third fold of the Eightfold Path. And this is a Eightfold Path is a foundational teaching of the way from suffering to liberation. Or we could also say it unfolds the life of awakening. And speech is this complex and multifaceted realm of our lives. And through speech, we may enact, perpetuate, and deepen suffering. And it's a realm through which we can open and share, express, and embody awakening. So it's a medium through which we as humans can have a meaningful, impactful participation. It's vital to how we share a world together. And each is not separate from our experience and our bodily action. Our whole being comes through our voice. And there's this a common experience, when we hear a recording of our voice, that we don't like it. And and there's various reasons for this, but one study I read about found that the reason actually that we don't like to hear the sound of our voice is that there is we reveal more about our inner state than we think we do, and we're uncomfortable with that. When we're speaking, we don't realize how much is coming out, how much we're giving, and that when we hear a recording, it's like, ooh. So speech is this flow of giving and receiving. And speech can form, it can inform, and speech also performs. We do things with our words. Speech is imbued with various forms of doing. And I would say it's skillful speech is a practice. So it's not something we master. It's not something we get right. It's endless engagement, endless possibility and transformation. And speech creates an environment. Speech creates a space. And so what kind of space do we want to create with our speech through our practice of speech? And one place to start exploring skillful speech is actually not with saying something, but with listening. Thich Nhat Hanh says that deep listening is the foundation of skillful speech. And so, how do we listen? We listen to sounds with our ears. We listen with our thinking mind, attending to the content of speech. We can listen with our heart and our body, which is, not the same as listening to the sounds or listening to the content. And we can also listen as joining the wholeness of listening, the wholeness of the sound, speech, ears, mind, heart, body as one event. Listening is giving space. So listening opens a space and we attend to what comes without rushing to fill it in with something. Just receive. And Zazen, our sitting meditation practice, is a practice practice of deep listening, listening to sounds, listening to sensations, emotions, feelings, stories, voices, inner and outer. And this listening is intimate. It's um, it's very close. It's intimacy that feels into grasping. And in this listening of zazen, thoughts and stories arise. And listening is not that we get intensely involved in the content of these thoughts, nor is it that we try to stop the thoughts or stories. Listening can be a kind of inquiry. What needs to be heard here? What needs to be felt? What is the request? And listening is a gift we give to ourselves. And it can be also a gift we give to each other. And this listening practice of zazen um, can include working with uh, internal speech, the ways we talk to ourselves. And this can include looking at my conditioning and some of the ways I have internalized speech and that live in me. And so how have I been conditioned to speak to myself? And then this is how I talk to myself is a root of how I talk to others. So how is my internal speech or my self-talk, how is that skillful or unskillful, helpful or not helpful? How does it perpetuate suffering? How does it open into change, into healing and liberation? And when we're working with this internalized speech, um, not just working with the words, but with the psychophysical situation. So the body, mind, emotional formation that's happening with internal speech. And so we have this embodied practice of zazen, which can support us to take up a whole body and mind study of our conditioning, of how we work. Part of my experience of preparing for a talk is fear. And I usually feel my fear as a restless, uncomfortable churning in my belly. And for various reasons, some of which are clear and some of which aren't, in the past month, my fear has been more intense than usual. I've had more discomfort. The pain has been uh, stronger. And with this, and as I've met this, I've felt this resolve to be, deeper resolve to become intimate with this fear, with these sensations. And so partially there's this fear, these sensations, this kind of churning, and then as I become intimate, I feel there's tightness, there's bands of holding, there's ways I'm trying to control my fear and hold it in place or hold it down. And so without trying to pry open the grasping, but just feel this grasping, feel these bands of tightness, feel all the way through. So thoroughly feel them and allow them, allow the whole situation to be as it is. And then there can be moments when this tightness releases. And sometimes when the tightness releases, the fear releases, or the fear changes. And then I open to this changed fear. And in this last month, um, this changed fear has, it's not been fear at all. It's been a different kind of pain. So the fear dissipates, and then there's this pain in the middle of my chest. And yeah, and I would not describe it as fear. It feels like a wound, and it's not churning. It's just open and raw. And as I've been kind of becoming intimate with this wound, you know, fear is like oriented towards something that's going to happen, or maybe something that is happening. Well, this wound feels like something that has happened. So it's kind of based in the past. And then, you know, then fear is often, you know, if something has happened to us in the past that we don't want to happen again, this gives us fear. So it makes sense that these are connected. And so now I'm welcoming and feeling this wound, and I can, and finding tightness there, holding there, and sometimes that holding releases. And sometimes when the holding releases, the pain gets more intense, or like impressively intense. And sometimes it just spreads and expands and hurts less. And the practice is not like, when am I going to stop feeling this pain? but finding a healing presence. And so one thing I've also been doing with this wound is just listening to it. And I can hear voices. I can hear some speech. Something like, you are not enough. Or just sometimes very simple, just like wrong. Or no. And the pain of the wound is then like a wound or pain of disapproval, or loss of love, or disconnection, not feeling held. And so there's this internalized speech. It might not even be speech I feel like I'm saying. It's words that have become part of me. And so how do I work with those words, with that internalized speech? You know, shame is another kind of speech that, you know, we can have, you know, that, and that a kind of self-hating, a judgment that's trying to kind of like, that we've internalized, is like, this is the way I'll be good, is I'll just hate the stuff that's bad, or not right, or not perfect. So how do we work with this kind of internalized speech? We could try just to speak over it, or try to control it, or we could try to suppress it. But as I'm sitting, you know, in intimacy with this wound, kind of messing with the words seems sort of not a way of connecting with the wound and actually healing. And so what actually opens a dynamic growth? Or what opens a space of change? And so my feeling is that the developing a connection is what's healing, and releasing the grasping is what's liberating, and these two are intertwined. And so grasping or the holding or the tightening of these are my attempts to take care of myself um, in an unskillful way. I'm trying to take care of myself, but it's trying to take care of myself in a way that actually prevents the wound from healing, keeps the wound alive and unintegrated. And it also keeps the fear going, keeps other unskillful stuff based on the wound going. And so in working with the wound and working with this speech, to not just add another layer of grasping. Shame, could be another way of just adding another layer of grasping on top of grasping. So what is speech that opens a connection? And so I could offer metta or loving kindness. I could say something like, meet with my pain with mercy and care. Or I could also just address the wound or the pain, like, welcome. I am here with you now. You are whole. Or some inquiry. How can I take care of you? What is it? What is a healing connection? And with these words, so introducing speech to continue to feel and be grounded in the body, to breathe into the pain, to let breath carry these words, this speech into the pain. So constantly growing a somatic connection. And the healing, I feel, is in the growing or thickening or deepening of this connection of relationship and intimacy. And not in a kind of getting rid of, getting past, transcending, or getting beyond the pain or the wound. So this is a integrative or inclusive approach. So that's something about working with internalized speech. And so turning to external or interpersonal speech, I wanted to bring up a few reflections on two key qualities of skillful speech. So truthfulness and kindness. So it's first to say something about truthfulness or truth, or being honest. Dojin and I often invoke Dogen's image from Genjo Koan of going out into the middle of an ocean and looking around. And all you can see in that situation is a circle of water. So Dogen says, like, even though that's all you can see, the other features of oceans and mountains are infinite in variety. And he says, like, with everything, all we see is a limited circle of water. Beyond everything we know or see or feel or could say, there's always features beyond what we say or see or know that are infinite in variety. And our problem is not, I would say, that we can't know the whole ocean. Our problem is when we grasp our circle of water as, the circle of water of what we know or what we see as the ocean. And so practice is not trying to get rid of our circles. of water. It's not trying to get rid of our constructs or what we know. We need that. Um, but is how do I speak, from my circle of water, knowing it's just a circle of water. And so one practice I've been exploring with this is locating myself. So, and this is to kind of put us in a circle of water that we are acknowledging as just a circle of water. So locating myself as a man, as heterosexual, as I guess I would say somewhat cisgendered, not totally cisgendered. Um, it could also include locating myself as someone who was born in the late 60s, 1960s, raised on the south side of Chicago, living in Northern California for about the last 30 years. I can locate myself as someone who is white. And as someone who is white, growing up in this country, someone who's been impacted and shaped by the systemic racism I grew up in. And while I didn't choose that, taking responsibility for that. When I don't apprehend my circle of water as the ocean, then when I speak, there's some natural humility, uncertainty, openness, and curiosity. And so, and I'm kind of open to new information and new kinds of information. And this makes me open to learning and growing in new ways. And I would say also that this locating myself is a moment to moment practice. It's a kind of an ongoing living inquiry. And also, to locate myself is always situational, it's context dependent, and it's always relational. Um, as I thought about this, I reflected on, this example of a speech act is I love you. And so in my closest relationships, I've said this many times. And so when I say it today, it's not really novel information. And I think for me, this is an important part of what truthfulness can be, is not a kind of revelation of some novel content or some information that wasn't previously known, but as a practice of speech, expressing in a living way where I am right now. And our loving relationships being something we're caring for. We care for these relationships. We care for all of our relationships, hopefully. And so when we say I love you, this can be an act of just of caring for the relationship and making contact, making a connection and this is a practice. This isn't a something we finish. So that there's a truthfulness, there can be a truthfulness in what we're saying, not so much in the content, but in the connection to my life and the connecting to whoever I'm with. And the truthfulness is, in this case, is more like where the words are coming from. And this is not about how do we have the same circle of water, but just this opening to how we're in an ocean together. Part of letting go of our circle of water as the ocean can feel like and can be a letting go of how we establish myself how I establish, how I know who I am, or letting go of an investment in, in certain ideas of myself and identity. And at the same time, becoming more fully actually myself, but not a self which is established by a circle of water, but myself in an ocean and as an ocean. And so I see this locating myself in a kind of as a dynamic thing, and as a middle way between kind of grasping my circle of water or my identity construct as real, and also denying its reality, impact, or relational significance. So a middle way, and a middle way with transformative potential. And again, towards a kind of integrative liberation. So not a freedom from, but a freedom with this actual person, this body and heart and mind and wound and stuff. You know? And this is also to say that we kind of let go of speaking from an objective place, that there's some objective perspective that we could assume and speak from. And I would say that doesn't exist. We don't get that. We're totally located. We're totally subjective. But we have this idea of an objective view, and when we get caught by that, we can enact domination. There are Zen teachings which kind of imply or say that basically everything we say is a mistake, and then also not saying anything is a mistake. So there's a koan that says, if you speak, you get 30 blows. If you don't speak, you get 30 blows. So 30 blows was like a criminal punishment. So they're like, anyway, if you speak, wrong. If you don't speak, wrong. And we value silence in Zen. And silence is this wonderful support for studying skillful speech. And sometimes silence can actually be a living expression of skillful speech. So we have in Zen, we have moments in our stories where silence is the expression, it is the response. But also silence is not a place to abide. And silence can become a way of avoiding the risk and responsibility and transformative potential of speaking. And so this koan, I think one way I can experience this koan, if you speak, you get 30 blows. If you don't speak, you get 30 blows. I could experience it as a kind of double bind or like a catch-22. But I feel like the koan is actually asking me to live in a dynamic tension, and a tension that between how anything we say is kind of a problem, but also that we can't hide out in silence. Or that's the kind of negative way of putting it. I mean, the more positive way of putting it would be living in a tension of the responsibility to speak and a responsibility to care for silence. And so when it comes to giving a Dharma talk, I feel kind of humbled about anything I could say. And I often think of Katagiri Roshi saying, "You have to say something." And so I feel like our speech, when we're in touch with this tension, it can enliven our speech. And what time is it? Okay. I want to say a few words about kindness. Mainly, I wanted to offer a distinction between kindness and being nice. And where being nice can be a way of avoiding discomfort, while kindness involves in actually acknowledging, facing, and working with discomfort. And so kindness being offered as a way for us to actually to be real with each other. And we can, we there's an idea of like, well, what is a safe place? And I think along with like being nice, there's a kind of idea, well, a safe place is where I'm not going to be made to feel uncomfortable. And that there's a little bit of a demand, or a kind of rule. We're going to be nice, and we're not going to push each other into discomfort. And this is a kind of a way that we can relate to each other, and it's also a way that perpetuates suffering. Um, and it's kind of a way of bypassing, and it can create social confinement, and it can block transformative intimacy and inquiry. So how do we, in nurturing a real connection, how do we skillfully face discomfort? And rather than a safe space, then like there's this idea of like, well, a brave space. Actually, safe spaces just don't exist. They're illusory. So we can try for that, but that you just have to go into denial if you want a safe space. And I would say, so a foundation of our kind speech is our intimacy with our own discomfort, my own pain and hurt, reactivity, and responsiveness. And I also feel like this is part of, or I feel kind of a connection here with what Dojin was speaking of a few weeks ago, of calling in. So calling in, this is challenging each other, but it's not in a way that's shaming each other. And we can call each other in and actualize coming together rather than separating. And then kind of the last thing I want to touch on here is to turn skillful speech as skillful conversation. And that conversation is a turning together. It's turning and being turned. And it's mutual. It's reciprocal. So skillful speech is a mutually transformative conversation, mutually challenging and mutually awakening. So it's not speech. Sometimes I hear speech and it can sound like, well, is this like a one-way communication? And I would say if it's skillful speech, it's a two-way meeting. So this is like this reciprocity of deep listening and expressing ourselves fully with truthfulness and kindness. And every interaction or an encounter is a chance to explore and learn how to be here with this person in a way that's allowing this encounter to teach me something. Something that I could not bring to this moment, something that's only here about what it is to be together fully. So we're kind of any interaction, any conversation could be entering into a kind of a sense of partnership with humility and curiosity. And a conversation is it's a co-creation. So here's this chance to show up for something that's never exactly happened before. And there isn't a technique or some special insight that we actually can bring to this. I mean, we can try, but I would say that our the deepest intimacy is going to open from showing up with trust and finding a fullness of life here that is not going to fit in our circle of water. And this is speech that's fully humanizing each other and opens change and opens healing and opens liberation and is often hard because it is vulnerable and it is relational and it is not in my control. And it's opening to a broader and deeper sense of responsibility at the same time. All right, so thank you very much. So now we have time for expressions, speech, comments, questions. So please, the way we do it here is just unmute yourselves and speak.
Korin, Cindy, I just want to thank you for talking about the responsibility to speak. Because I'm sure, as you know, it's one of my most difficult things I've been working on this for a long time. So it was really helpful, the way that you talked about it and talked about avoidance and silence and not wanting to risk. And, so thinking about what am I risking and what am I afraid of? And anyway, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Korin. What opportunities do we have in the context of the Zen Center to have this kind of conversation, this mutual going back and forth? We're so, of course, with COVID, we're so impaired to be having face-to-face, involvement. But just in general, even sometimes I wonder if we have enough opportunities to take this practice of skillful conversation with each other, because we do have a foundation of trust with each other. Mm-hmm. So it's really a real opportunity for practice.
Yeah, well, I think it is hard during this, in the restrictions of these times. We do offer, the teachers offer practice and discussion, and so we're happy to engage or work on our skillful speech together in that way. And we will offer small group discussions after this talk, after announcements. And then Friday morning in particular, we've offered after Zazen, there's a chance to gather. I think for a while that was happening, and then there's been kind of waning interest. I feel like it's we definitely want to encourage it as part of our practice together, as part of our actual how we wake up together and care for liberation in the world. And so I think we're open to however we could support this practice in the Sangha. We're open to suggestions.
Thank you.
Korin, I think
Yes.
thanks for the talk, and I think it's interesting that you're talking about trust, in particular in communication, because in the current political situation, trust is obviously something that we can't trust is going to happen. And I'm just wondering, if that has some kind of a real powerful effect on the trust that people, want to use in their relations, that it really enhanced our distrust.
Well, I feel like there are different kinds of trust and distrust happening. I feel like if we're having distrust, that's important to look at, become intimate with that, and what is that? I don't actually feel like our practice is saying we should blindly trust, but that there are forms of distrust or doubt which hold us back from meeting the fullness of this moment. And I would say I'm interested in releasing those. And there might be ways in which there are wholesome or positive forms of doubt and distrust. There's appropriate distrust. So it's not that we have a kind of a blind blanket trusting everything policy. Some things that are happening are not okay. We should not trust them. We need to question them, question each other, question our own participation, and have a lot of doubt. But I feel like when doubt holds me back from can I meet this moment fully, then I feel like for me that's an unhelpful doubt, a doubt or distrust that I want to kind of question and release. So I'm not sure if that speaks to you, what you're saying.
Well, I'm thinking of how our leader is, our president has sown a lot of distrust in the country, and how that must spill over into personal relationships, because you become very sensitized to what people are saying. You become more judgmental. I'm really wondering, it would be interesting to have a survey or something like that to see if people feel that trust is more of an issue than it was before 2016.
Yeah, well, it could be, and I think also my guess is that the pandemic is not helping trust. that there's in just in everyday interpersonal interactions, that there's this a questioning about is this safe to have an interaction at all, right?
I feel like, we've been we've been seeing our neighbors a lot more, and still there's that thought in the back of your mind is like, have they been being careful, with their COVID approach? And it's terrible to have your trust being sort of assaulted that way.
I mean, I think that when there's a pandemic, part of our survival brain will get involved and wondering, where's the disease and how do I get away from it? Yeah. So it's something to kind of study in ourselves carefully. Because we can live under that, or we can live from that, but if we're in touch with it, we can we can allow it to be there without it running our life.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This conversation right now has made me, I sort of had a disconcerting little insight, which is, we're talking about trust and trusting our government now. Well, we feel, many of us, that we can't trust what we're hearing from our executive branch and some of the news, because of its sources. And we have other views, so we can see that there's something not to trust, but it tears at the fabric. But my realization was that this not being able, feeling that it is wrong to trust, that there's something untrustworthy about this information, is something that disadvantaged groups in this country, and I'm thinking particularly of Black Americans, I'm sort of visualizing myself into this, perhaps wrongly, that have always had a lack of truth spoken to them by the social discourse, the political discourse, and that tearing of the fabric. This is just a little sense of what we're experiencing of how something like, in a small way, I think, what it must be like to be part of a disadvantaged group that is told untruths, and that the rest of us are told untruths about.
Mm.
That breaking up of trust. Anyway, that's where I am this moment. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I think that applies to. It would also apply to, a relationship to police. As white people, how white people are generally brought up in this country to relate to the police and as trusting that they're there to protect them, and that being a very different experience, I think, from people who that's not their experience. It's not what's happening.
Good morning, Korin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Roberta. I really liked your talk, and it's something I've been grappling with. Not having a lot of people currently to talk with, and be mindful of having skillful conversation, as it were, or conversation that is meaningful. I do have with my children on the telephone and a couple of really close friends. So this is one of my few venues for really feeling a deeper sense of community and consciousness around being woke, a term that's come out, I believe that term came out of Black Oakland and around Black Lives Matter to some extent, and how, to me, and listening to the whole reality of a dynamic between trust and lack of trust, seems healthy not to trust. It seems healthy to me to be skeptical and to doubt. And then where you do find trust, to trust that, where it's a process of intimacy, really. I believe it is, something that we find intimately. I don't mean with lovers, I mean in a conversation that is both, from people who really want to experience being authentic and honest. And I think that we view our government with, whether it's the current administration or past ones, there's always a sense that we're being manipulated. Maybe more so now than ever, for sure. But I think it's amazingly powerful that we have Black Lives Matter at this time. Years and years ago, I did many unlearning racism classes. We were required when I worked at Mills College to do that back in the early 90s. It was powerful, and I'm indebted to the teachers who really, opened up that conversation for me in a more meaningful way.
Mhm.
I'm also really grateful that uh, Stone Creek has done such a powerful addressing of what matters in Black lives and in life, and just want to express my gratitude. I was hearing you speak this morning of something. I wanted to ask you to address this about the pain that comes after the fear. And I wondered if you were talking about grief,
Mm.
because I feel that we're all somewhat in a state of grief
Mm.
with the
Um,
fires and losses. Anyway, thank you.
yes. Well, I would say I feel like there is grief in the neighborhood um, of this wound, grief but I feel like the wound actually for me is, I don't see it exactly as grief, but as some more like an acute kind of relational, emotional manifestation of feeling disconnected and separate. You know,
Mm.
so kind of and and then I think there could be grief in relation to that, and grief are all around that. That this wound is in me, that has happened, that it's still with me. Um, I think there's grief.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, so let's do the closing chant. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it. All right, so we have